All right, welcome to this explainer. We are jumping right back into the fascinating arguments presented in the book P.O.R.N. Today, we're impartially exploring Chapter 10, titled OnlyFans and the Rise of Self-Objectification. We're really going to dig into the author's cultural critique of how monetized sexuality has profoundly shifted our modern culture, often right under this guise of empowerment.
They told her to take her power back, so she did, $1 at a time. Chapter 10 opens with that provocative quote, and it instantly sets up the central tension we're going to unpack today. You know, it's this stark paradox between the illusion of empowerment and the really harsh reality of the digital market. We have to ask, are we looking at commodification as a genuine act of liberation, or is it actually just a brand new form of exploitation?
Now, to understand this, we have to look at how it builds on the foundations the book laid out in earlier chapters. The author argues that if birth control severed sex from consequence, and then pornography severed sex from relationship, well, these monetized platforms represent a third massive fracture. They're severing intimacy from the self entirely, essentially turning the human body into a digital product.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the promise of empowerment.
The book points out that the mirror has effectively turned inward. So, for decades, classic feminist critique focused on the male gaze, right? Women being objectified by others. But today, the modern digital economy is characterized by self-objectification. It's a system where individuals are willingly commodifying themselves and then justifying it as taking back their power.
And we're not talking about some tiny fringe subculture here. Fueled by pandemic isolation and financial instability, platforms like OnlyFans saw an absolutely explosive surge. We're talking about jumping from 7 million to over 120 million users in less than 2 years. Almost overnight, the taboo was just rebranded as trendy remote work. Which brings us to Section 2, escalation in the market. The author asks us to consider the rise of bop houses. These are build our platforms luxury mansions rented out by talent managers where young creators actually live together just to cross-promote their brands. The book frames these as modern digital brothels, where this really fierce competition creates a relentless race to the bottom, essentially reducing these carefully crafted brands back to mere bodies.
Inside these houses, creators are pushed through what is basically an escalating funnel. You know, to maintain relevance, managers and peers push them from starter content, like cute selfies and dances, into increasingly explicit acts, and eventually, extreme viral stunts. The author describes this as a form of industrialized self-erasure.
We'll literally see this industrialized erasure in creators mentioned in the text, like Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue. There's this example of a creator who engaged with 101 men in 24 hours for a stunt that was ironically framed as liberation. Only later, she admitted to severe emotional dissociation. And crucially, the book reminds us that these stunts leave permanent digital trails. They are archiving youthful compromise forever. Moving on to Section 3, the psychological toll. When you strip away the manufactured smiles, empirical research exposes a pretty grim reality. The author cites a 2021 study revealing significant body dysmorphia driven by constant self-surveillance. Then, by 2023, data highlighted severely strained personal relationships alongside this concept of performance self-fragmentation, which is essentially a deep identity crisis born from blurring your public and private selves.
Furthermore, a 2022 survey highlighted in the text shows a staggering gap. Adult content creators report depressive symptoms at twice the rate of the general population. Why? Well, the text argues it's the agonizing instability of online attention. It creates this persistent, underlying terror of just being forgotten by the algorithm.
So let's look at Section 4, the illusion of control.
The text forces us to ask a really critical question here. When every platform monetizes attention, and the impersonal god of the internet demands you be bolder, sexier, and more extreme just to avoid algorithmic erasure, what choice is truly free? What initially feels like empowerment rapidly mutates into a total dependency on the market. The author points out a really dark irony at play. In an attempt to sell herself to escape traditional gatekeepers, a creator actually becomes entirely dependent on male validation and purchasing power. The patriarchs she was told to overthrow now just rent her body, one subscription at a time. She's auctioning herself to the highest bidder. And, as the saying goes, he who pays the piper calls the tune.
That leads us to Section 5, downstream cultural effects.
The book argues this system conditions both sexes in deeply harmful ways. On one side, adolescent girls are being trained to be endlessly performative, basically mistaking engagement metrics and likes for actual love. And simultaneously, a whole generation of men is being trained to merely consume bodies through a screen, which severely erodes their ability to forge real-world covenants. Looking toward the future, the author warns that we are facing a massive threat of generational sexual shame. The children of today will grow up having to navigate permanent, highly public digital archives of their parents' commodified bodies. This whole economy, the text argues, erodes trust, makes vulnerability feel dangerous, and severely compromises long-term family stability.
Finally, Section 6, the broader thesis.
Ultimately, the author asserts that monetized sexuality completely inverts our natural relational order. It takes the sacredness and the vulnerability of human connection and replaces it with synthetic transactional exposure. The core message is that the human body and intimacy itself was meant for love and for covenant, not for a digital auction block.
So, Chapter 10 really attempts to redefine the word empowerment entirely. True power, according to the book, isn't limitless exposure or getting financial gain through commodification. It's actually the radical strength to maintain boundaries. It's knowing deep down that not everything must be seen, sold, or sacrificed just for algorithmic validation.
As we prepare to move into later chapters of the book, which are going to explore our digital future, things like AI companionship and virtual reality, we really have to confront the reality of this commodified world. The author challenges us to ask, will we continue to sell ourselves into loneliness, or will we reclaim what it truly means to be human and seek authentic connection?
It's a heavy question to ponder as we move forward. To dig deeper into these concepts and to support the author, please visit the interactive companion site at pervertingourreproductivenature.com.